the CDG BizCast. I'm your host, Christian Gonzalez, co-owner of Creativity Design Group, a digital marketing firm in Houston, Texas. In today's episode, we are interviewing Aisha Khan of Houston Warehouse Studios and her own photography/video firm, Ama by Aisha, which is one of Houston's leading wedding photography and videography companies. Entrepreneurs are all about creating solutions that others could not provide, and that's exactly what our special guest today has done. Houston Warehouse Studios is located at 1506 Lorraine Street, just north of downtown Houston, and they are all about providing a creative space for small businesses, innovators, and creators at competitive rates for all budgets. We are going to get to learn all about how Aisha's incredible journey as an entrepreneur began and how her creativity has made a major impact on the creative industry of the Houston area. Welcome, Aisha, and thank you for joining me today to share your amazing story.
Well, thank you for having me, and thank you for that awesome intro as well.
It's a privilege to have you on today. We love talking to entrepreneurs of all walks of life, and I know you have a great story to share with us. So first, I would like to ask you, how did your passion for photography and cinema begin?
It started a long time when I was very little, actually. I remember, or some of my most favorite memories when I was young is looking at photos of people that I never even met. My grandfather was the sole owner of a camera in his town in Venezuela. And so he took it upon himself to photograph any events happening in the neighborhood, any parties that were going on, just little house parties. And he also loved taking portraits of his family. He had a really big family, had 10 kids, and he loved to tell them to dress up and go to the plaza and just take pictures. So he has hundreds and hundreds of photos, hundreds of negatives, and he passed away before I met him. But as a kid, my grandmother would sometimes pull out all the photos and negatives, and we would lay them on the floor and look through the photos, and she would tell me stories about the people in there or what was going on. And it was really interesting for me to look at the photos. I just loved doing it. And I think my passion started there.
Nice. So it traces all the way back to your grandfather, who was taking photos during the days of film.
Yeah, he had a huge camera. I actually have one very similar, and I have some of the negatives now too, which is cool because I just feel like I have a little part of him.
Nice. It's nice that you're carrying on your grandfather's legacy, and being that it traces all the way back to when you were a kid, that really shows that you had a true passion and your grandfather just sparked it. When we're kids, we often say, I want to be this, I want to be that, and you already knew immediately what you wanted to be, and that was to get into the photography industry.
Well, actually, I didn't know that I wanted to get in the industry because I didn't recognize it as an industry. What's funny is that my grandfather was an entrepreneur. He did have a lot of businesses. He did a lot of things, always worked for himself. But of all the things that he did and charged for, he never charged for photography. And so this was just a passion that he had and never made it into a profession. And whenever I looked at his photos, I didn't think of it that way. And for a long time, I took classes in high school for photography and in college as well, but I never thought of it as a profession. I just liked it. And it was someone else that put kind of that seed in there that thought, hey, why don't you charge for photos? And they were the ones with the idea. I never had thought of this as a profession.
Wow, that's incredible. See, entrepreneurs always have this mindset where we're always thinking outside of the box. And you took it to the next level by turning this into a business. You took your interest that you gained when you were a kid, you allowed your talent to grow, you took classes on it, and then in the end, you realized that you can actually make some money doing this. This could be your business. And that's how a lot of small business owners begin. At first, it's just a hobby, but when they realize that they have this potential to really skyrocket, then they form their business. They decide, okay, I don't want to work for anybody. I want to do this full time, and I want it to be my own thing.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's definitely the path that I ended up in somehow.
Well, to further build upon that, how did your passion for photography exactly lead to your entrepreneurial journey? I mean, you've already told me about it, but in more detail, when did you decide that you really wanted to start a business? When did you decide that you did not want to work for somebody taking photos and videos? You wanted to start your own business doing it.
Yeah, I was going to college. As I said, I had taken some photography classes, but not with the mindset that it would be a profession. And I was taking other classes too, and I didn't have a major. So I felt like I was dedicating a lot of money and energy into school, not knowing what for. And I was also trying to balance work, a job that was going to be a dead end, and I knew that. So I was trying to find find a solution for myself. It was my friend that then over dinner, when I was venting to her, she's, sparked the idea, why aren't you a photographer? And I remembered at that point when I was in high school, I was taking some art classes, and my art teacher said, if you're going to go into art, don't go to a school, do a college degree for art, because basically you're just going to pay to build a portfolio. Instead, if you have the discipline, you can just create your portfolio. And so I decided to, at that point, take that advice. I quit college. I kept my job because I need to pay bills, but I dedicated myself to creating a portfolio. I was thinking that I would dedicate a year to just building a brand in a sense and a portfolio so that I can then start charging people. But what I didn't realize that it would take off pretty quickly. So the year didn't happen. I think it ended up being about 4 months or so that, I put my name out there for a few people, got a few things in my portfolio, and then from then on started charging. And then it started very quickly. My calendar started to get full to the point where it didn't make sense to keep the job anymore. The money just wasn't adding up. The job that I had wasn't adding up to the same as the jobs that I was having to turn down in order to keep the other. And so I went ahead and put in my 2 weeks notice, and I haven't looked back since. It has been challenging, obviously, having no safety net, having, I'm sure not having that guaranteed paycheck, not just now, but maybe in a few months. Banks don't love it, and neither do we in a sense. But one thing that I learned from the job that I had before is that I do have a way of always figuring it out. And with dedication, I stay focused and I make sure to make things work. And so now it's been well over 10 years of me making it work.
Nice. That's quite a feat. I would like to share with you my experience as I started my own business because I find it relatable. And in a way, I found some parallels to your story as well. So as you know, CDG focuses on web design and graphic design and digital marketing. When I was in high school, and we're talking about over a decade ago, the year was 2008. And one of the classes that I had was called webmastering. They were supposed to teach us how to make websites and use Adobe Photoshop and Illustrator, but we didn't learn anything there. But because I did not get the quality of teaching that I needed, my interest was sparked. So after high school, I went to the Art Institute, which is no longer in business, by the way. And I studied web design. I learned WordPress and learned how to do a few other little things here and there. And even after school, I just kept studying and learning on my own how to do certain things. Whatever they didn't teach us in school, I taught myself. But after I left school, then I had some, like you said, dead-end jobs. I knew I was going nowhere with these jobs. And I knew that if I stayed at them, my career was never going to take off. So that's when I decided I have this skill set. I know how to do this stuff. I don't need to be working for anybody anymore. Now, the biggest difference between your story and my story is that it probably took CDG a few years to truly take off versus when you got started, you took off like a rocket almost instantly. And for most small business owners, it takes at least a few years or so. I always say, depending on what field you're in, it could take 3, maybe even 5 years till your company truly takes off. But when you know how to do your stuff like you do, it doesn't take that long. I mean, after you started, how long would you say it took? Maybe about a year, not less than that, maybe?
Yeah, I mean, it definitely was a buildup. I'm not going to say that I had the success or the turnout or the profit level at that point that I have now. I've slowly gotten to this level, but I was able to pay my bills, I'll say, and do this full time, I think within about a year. And I will say, though, that I was in a position where, which I didn't plan for, but I was put in a position where I had to make it. My partner at the time ended up losing his job, and we had just bought a house. And so I had mortgage to pay. And I had our own, personal bills to pay. And I didn't have a job because I had already quit. And I was thinking that with both of our incomes that we would be fine. But I suddenly found myself in the first year of business. And you and I both know that first year of business, you don't make money.
That's right.
But I was in a position where not only did I had to survive, but I had to make money in order to pay the bills. It was extremely challenging. The first year definitely felt like I was drowning. Made it through the second year. I still felt like I was drowning, but it was feeling better. By the third year, not having been in that relationship anymore definitely helped too. And I think that's when I started breathing a little bit more.
Right. And that goes back to what you were saying earlier about making sure that they have a safety net. I talk about this all the time with other entrepreneurs and business owners. And I think we've all been there where when we leave our job, maybe because we felt it wasn't going the direction we wanted it to go, like we knew it was a dead end job, or maybe our boss was just a total tyrant and we got tired of working for them. Sometimes we just decide we want to walk away from that job. But at the same time, we need to keep in mind that we're cutting off our guaranteed source of income and venturing out in the unknown. And that's the dangerous part of starting a business. It is scary. It's dangerous. And I know for a fact that that's how I felt too. I got tired of my dead end job. So I walked away from it because I knew for a fact that I wanted to start CDG. But again, you make some really good points. For all of our listeners out there, remember, make sure that when you decide you want to leave your full-time job, you truly are ready to do it. Don't just walk away from it immediately. Make sure that you have enough money saved up so you can cover your expenses. Once you know the time is right for you to say goodbye to your boss and move on and actually be your own boss, you'll know it in your heart. You'll feel it. Moving on, I want to learn more about your photography style. What makes your style unique and different from others? And that also includes your videography work as well. Because there's a lot of photographers in the Houston area, a lot of people who specialize in this field, but your company's one of the leading ones, especially when it comes to wedding photography. So what makes your style unique and different?
Well, I think part of it starts from how I looked at photography in the first place back when I was very little, looking at photos that I didn't even have a connection with personally. I wasn't taking the photos. I didn't know who these people were, and yet I was looking at them. And so my approach to photography has been with that in mind, that there's going to be generations from now are going to be looking at those photos. And I want those people to feel something, to feel a connection. I think also a way in which we stand out and with both photo and video is the way that we provide our service. I want everyone to feel special, especially with AI coming up. It is going to be, I think, having a photo shoot done is going to be a treat. It is now already a treat, but I think even more so because people are going to realize, if I can just have an AI portrait done, why have a photo shoot? And that's going to come down to, the experience. It's not just the photos. So I think having portraits taken can be a very uplifting experience for anyone who's going through something, whether it be through their life, whether it be physically, whether it be a challenge in their business. It can be very uplifting for the team, for the person who's created everything. So I think the experience that we give people is a big part. And also, I think implementing our style on others, that's not something that I always want to do. I don't want to always make people seem like something they're not. But there are many clients that we have that want to look cool, even though they're maybe very shy. Maybe they don't have the personality to seem extra, but they want to seem very extra. And we have the ability while shooting to kind of pull out some personality from them and get them out of their shell. And then through editing also would kind of like present them maybe in a higher level than they might have felt at the beginning. So again, that goes back to like putting them or lifting them once they see all the final work.
That's very deep. I've never really had that perspective on photography work before, but that's very deep. And the way you describe it just brings more meaning to it. Every photograph means something. Maybe to some people, photographs are just pictures on paper, on screen, but there's meaning to them. It sounds like that when you take your photos, you want to add depth to them, meaning like when people look at that, they can see what's going on. They can see the message that's being conveyed through that one picture.
Yes, that's why they say a picture is 1,000 words, for sure.
It's also why we have art museums, because of that exact saying, a picture is worth 1,000 words. And photography is art, videography is art, and everyone has their own unique style to it. But like you said, you can't force one style on everybody else. Everybody is different. So you'll decide on, which methodology you're going to go through to adapt towards this one particular client's photo shoot, because maybe one style you have won't be fitting for the other. It's not cookie cutter. It's not one size fits all.
That's right. And I think that's one of the things that I love about the profession, because it doesn't get old when you realize that every single person is different. Every person that we work with has a different angle. And so I don't find myself doing the same thing over and over and over. As a creative, that's really important.
Right. And that's also one of the best things about being your own boss. You get to do something different every day versus if you're working for someone, you go to the same office every day, you see the same people. In our field, which are within the creative industry, we get to see different clients every day. The same principle also applies whenever I handle customers who need their logos or their websites, their business cards. Every job is different. There's no such thing as a cookie cutter concept in art. Every client's needs are always going to be different.
Yep.
But yes, your passion for photography has led to you to not only start your own firm, but you also started your own studio. So please tell us more about how you got Houston Warehouse Studio started.
Yeah, so it got started without me first, actually. I just was looking for a place to do a shoot, found this on Airbnb, and, I booked it through Airbnb. So it was really listed as a place to stay overnight, but I really wanted, and I inquired to the owner, can I just rent it for a couple hours for a shoot? They agreed. Then they met me up and ended up connecting with me, and we became good friends. So we stayed in touch, and they told me how they had this warehouse, but they were not into photography. They're not artists. They just kind of came across the property somehow, but we're kind of renting it out to people without any kind of business plan with it. It was, since it's such a cool space, it kind of ran itself just fine. But after a while, he decided to ask me if I wanted to partner up. So this happened the same year as Harvey. I remember when we decided to partner up, and I rebranded, gave it a new name, introduced it to the photography industry, pushed it more, and started trying to build a community as well. So we also decided to kind of furnish it in a sense that allows for photographers to use it very easily. It's easily accessible and easy to use for anyone who is professional at a very high level. So we have really big productions here happen, but it's also very easy for entry-level photographers to use. So we kind of wanted to accommodate both and make sure that everyone found it easy to use.
Very interesting. I know that this space has quite a storied history as well. So the building is over 100 years old, right?
It's actually 100 this year.
Wow.
Yeah.
I'm actually surprised to see that the building is still standing. And not only is it still standing, but it is being extremely accommodating. It's being put to good use by you. I like the fact that you're also trying to build up a community too. As small business owners, that's something that I encourage every day. A lot of times we often think that we're competing with people who are in the same business as us. But in reality, if we get to know competitors as neighbors, we end up helping each other out much more than you think.
Yeah, I agree. I have tried to convey that same message within the photography industry, or with the studio, I've been able to do that better. The last couple of events that we had here that were free events open to any photographer were headshot exchange. So my concept was that, I have a camera, you have a camera, and so let's take each other's headshots. And we had quite a few photographers come out and exchange headshots. It was a lot of fun. It's also very useful for us because as photographers, we do tend to neglect our own photography for ourselves. So it was great to make those connections, and I think people enjoyed it and kind of saw the value as well of having those connections within the industry and not seeing each other as competitors. As far as like other studios too, there's a bunch of them popping up all the time. And the thing is that it is still a unique space. There's not a lot of buildings in Houston that are 100 years old. And even the ones that are going to have a slightly different look. And it's okay. I don't expect everyone to want to use our studio for every single one of their shoots. It makes sense that they're going to rent out at other places.
What I like about this place is the rustic vintage charm that it gives off. I mean, you can't go to one of those photography studios in the mall and get a setup like this. That's what makes this so special and unique. Yeah,
and you can feel it's genuinely this old. It is also surprising that it's still standing because it is kind of falling apart, but it gives it a lot of character.
Right. I'm a fan of vintage things myself. The moment I stepped in here for the first time, I was immediately taken in by the vintage atmosphere. And the way you were able to repurpose it and retrofit it for this photography studio, it works really nicely. And there's nothing like it anywhere else in Houston. Like you said, there's other studios, but there's nothing like Houston Warehouse Studio. It truly is a hidden gem.
Thank you.
So as an entrepreneur, what advice do you have for all of the aspiring entrepreneurs out there who have decided that they want to be their own bosses? So these would be the people that you and me were once like, where they're not entrepreneurs yet. They have not started their businesses yet. They're still working for somebody else. else, they want to break free from that. They want to cut those chains and they want to be their own bosses doing their own thing.
Well, there's probably going to be a lot of people that are going to say something negative about your idea. And I think it's important to just stay focused and go for what you believe to be right. Go for what you believe is going to be good for you. Even if things aren't looking very profitable, push for it. If it's your passion, make it work. But do know that, I remember when I first told a few people that this is what the profession that I was going to go for, the response was that photography is dying and photographers don't make money. And, there's a little bit of truth to that. That could have been soul crushing for me at the time, but I decided, you know what, I'm going to push for it and I'm going to make it work. I'm going to do just fine. So I think one of the things is for sure, just follow your heart and don't let anybody tell you that you can't. And another thing is that understanding business is important. It's nice to be able to follow your passion and think that things are just going to fall into place, but we really do need to understand our numbers and understand how to do business professionally in order to stay afloat. Because, it's not easy to design a website. It's not easy to take photos. But when you have a passion for it, it will come easier than maybe handling a difficult client or maybe writing up a contract or maybe doing invoices. These are things that we don't want to do, but you have to do it. You have to do it well, and you really need to be dedicated, because otherwise, from a professional standpoint, you're just not going to make it. And I've met some really wonderful photographers, way more skilled than me, that didn't make it because they couldn't understand the profession part of it.
And that was another thing that I was going to bring up. It's very important to know how to run a business. You have to know the ins and outs of business. A lot of entrepreneurs, they say they want to start a business. They have a talent, they have a trade. They know their trade very well, but they don't know the business side of things. That's actually why many small businesses fail, because they don't know the business aspect of things. For example, maybe there's a chef who's really good at making cakes, right? They may be the best in the world at making cakes and they want to start a bake shop. But if they don't know the business aspect of running a bake shop, such as how much it costs to make one cake, you have to know how much your ingredients cost. You have to know your operating costs. You have to know business law. You have to know contracts. There's all sorts of things not related to making cakes that you have to know to truly be in business. So like I said, knowing your talent and knowing business are two different things. And a lot of times aspiring business owners, they're not living in the real world at the moment. They think they can just put a sign up on a building, rent it out, and open up like nothing. That's wrong. You've got to know the ropes of what a business truly is.
For sure. It's okay for people who are not in that industry to not understand, and you can educate them, but you as a professional up front need to know how it all works. So I think some people might think that starting photography or video, you just get a camera and you're ready to go. But, the equipment costs more money than we realize. When we show up to shoot, that isn't all of the time that we're charging for. We're also charging for editing time. We're charging the production time, planning. Even you have to consider all of the inquiries that we get on a daily. That is running a business. It takes time. Putting up a contract, that takes time. So it's all of these little things. And then of course, keeping up with your skill, doing workshops, all of this costs money as well, and time. So I recently had a client or a potential client inquire, and she said she wanted to do an engagement shoot. And I told her my pricing is $950. I have an associate for $650, and it's an hour shoot. And so I know that it sounds like a lot. It is not, on the low end. It's not on the mid end. It is the high end. But I'm not a starting photographer, and I'm established, and I have a certain style that isn't exactly easy to copy. Her response was, well, we just want a fun shoot. So is it still the same cost? I know a lot of people get offended by these kind of questions, but I always remember that she's not in the profession. She doesn't know. So it's okay to ask. And I just politely answer the truth. Just because it's a fun shoot doesn't mean that I'm going to bring less skills. And it doesn't mean that I'm going to bring a fun camera. I'm still going to bring my professional camera. I'm going to still bring my same skill level. I'm going to still dedicate the same valuable time that I would for other shoots.
Right.
If anything, I said the price might go up if you want a bigger production. But if you're just wanting to have something, at a park in downtown, something like that, then this is the price. Because I can't lower my skill level just because you want something fun. And doing something fun still requires a certain skill. But it's okay for other people to know. But if you're going into this profession, it's important that you understand your value and what you're really putting in. You're not just showing up and editing and you're done.
That's right. There is a lot of work involved, and that's where your skills come in. That's where your skill sets truly start to blossom, and especially right in front of the client themselves when they see you in action. They may not understand it doing email correspondence or on the phone, but when they show up and you're actually doing the work right before their very eyes, then they'll start to understand why you charge the prices you do. Because on the consumer end, they don't really know what we go through. They don't understand why we price things the way we do. You'll hear people say, oh, they're too expensive. Oh, I can't afford that. That may or may not be true. We don't know. But if you watch us work, especially whenever I work on a website project, a major one, and the client sees me in action, because I do allow my clients to watch me work too, so they can truly see what they're getting. And it's to make sure that their expectations are being exceeded, not just met. I like it when clients work with us directly, but when they can see us in action like that, this is what tells them, I spent some good dollars here. I'm getting good value. I'm getting great service, and the end product is phenomenal. I'm going to recommend them again. Yes, they may be a little bit more on the higher end in pricing, but they're worth it. That's the type of message that you want to convey to your client, even if they're price conscious and rather thrifty.
Yeah, you've got to know your budget. You got to work with it. If someone is out of your budget, I don't take that personal when someone tells me, hey, you're out of my budget. I understand. I don't want to break anybody's bank. But the response, you're too expensive, is a different response, right? It's saying to say that someone is too expensive is to say that your value isn't worth it. Or I understand where my value is, but if you can't afford it, that's okay.
Right. And there are those customers who want to decide the price for themselves. That's a big no-no in business. They are not the ones owning the business. You and me are the business owners. We decide the price. And I mean, you can't go to Best Buy, pick out $1,000 TV and tell the store you're only paying $500 for it. They're just going to laugh at you and they're not going to let you buy it.
Yeah, that's true. Now, one of the things that I did learn very early on when I was in my first year, very desperate, I really did not want to have anyone who inquired to walk away. And I learned how to turn that around. When someone, you tell them this is the pricing, this is the package, and they say, well, can you do it for this price? I would say, well, obviously I don't want to do it for that price, but I would present to them what I can do for that price. So that way I could stay within their budget. They wouldn't walk away, but I also wasn't giving my work away.
Right.
So that's a way of turning that kind of inquiry around.
That's the methodology that I use too. Maybe they want a $1,000 website done at $500, and I tell them that's possible, but you're not going to get everything that's in the $1,000 package. And if you want a good laugh, 2 years ago, I had a lady who wanted to start her own clothing store online. Now, this is an e-commerce website. She was probably looking at around $1,000 for a website like this. And she was just rude from the get-go when she came in the door. She was like, no, give me the lowest price you can get. And I told her, for the lowest price you can get a one-page landing page that has no e-commerce functionality. And it's just a brochure website describing what your business is, but there's no way for people to buy. And then she's like, I can go through this company in Georgia and get this website done for $300. And then I professionally and respectfully told her, then I think you probably might be better off going to that firm. So she found a company that was in Georgia who could have done it much cheaper. And I just respectfully told her they might be the better option. We parted ways. But you can see, I already knew that if I had taken on this client, she was going to be trouble from the start because she was already rude the moment she walked in the door.
Yeah, it is important also to know which clients you don't want to have. We don't have anyone to shove them off to. We have to deal with them ourselves.
Right.
And our time is so valuable. Dedicating all this effort into a client that isn't going to appreciate your work, it's not something you want to do.
Exactly. If they don't like your work the first time you provide for them, then it's up to them if they want to continue to use your company or not. The consumer's choice. But for the most part, we don't really have any say in that part of the job. If they want to move on, they can move on somewhere else. We'd like to retain them as a client if they're happy. If they're going to be problems, then, we'll just complete their job, send them on their way. And if they decide that they don't want to use us again, well, that's completely fine. That's up to them.
Yeah.
The most important thing to remember is to not allow unhappy clients clients to bring us down, because it would be extremely unrealistic for me to say that everybody that you deal with is going to be satisfied. I've had customers who weren't satisfied before. I've had maybe one or two in the past, but we still got their job done. They were just picky. Maybe they just thought that we were going to give them the world. I mean, we would deliver a great project for them, but some clients you just can't please. You could give them the world and they're still going to be unhappy. Have you ever encountered any clients like that before, who were just so hard to please, impossible to please, even though you've done your absolute best, but they're still not satisfied?
I don't know. I've often wondered how some of the clients are, because, all of them really, or most of them will respond that they love all the photos, right? And they're quick to respond and to share that. Some of them maybe say that, and I wonder, I don't know. We're in a profession where, again, we're uplifting people, and it's a service that is meant to do that. So I think people have been responsive in a really good way. And I'm trying to think of someone that just wasn't. But sometimes I do wonder if, are you just saying that?
Right. Sometimes we get clients like that who kind of pull our strings. They sound like they might be interested, or they're pretending like they're happy, but in reality, they probably aren't. That's just up to the imagination. We may never know, but the most important thing to remember is, regardless of whether they're satisfied or not, that we deliver, that we fulfill our contract. We make sure that they get their deliverables at the end of the day, and the job is fulfilled. Regardless if they're happy with it or not, it's still important as business owners for us to fulfill our obligations to them.
Yeah. And I do remember one client now that was an interesting case, because she did express to her wedding planner that she wasn't happy with the photos. She felt terrible about them. And what was interesting is that, we feel a lot with our clients, because that's what we want to do. We want to understand their feelings. So we're feeling for them. And so after the wedding, when I was reviewing the photos, I felt like she was very tough on herself, and I was being very tough on myself. And I thought, I think these photos are great, but right now the feeling that I'm getting is that I don't know. And so I sent the photos, and I had heard from the client that she left them, they were great. Then later, and I mean years later,
oh wow,
I heard from the planner that she was heartbroken when she first saw the photos. And then the planner saw the photos. She said, well, I got to see them. Let me see. She thought, these photos are amazing. What are you talking about? Well, later, those same photos were published in a magazine, and then it was also published in several blogs. And then years later, it was reposted by an influencer on her Instagram as inspiration for her own wedding. And it was interesting because, obviously the bride, our client's mind changed, her feelings changed towards the photos, and she did love them. Eventually, they got an album, and I think her feelings just completely changed. But it took some time. And I think in the end, it wasn't the work that she didn't like, but rather the feelings that were behind it, which are out of my control. Like I said, I could tell that she was being really hard on herself during the wedding. I could tell that there were a lot of feelings that weren't positive and kind of negative, that were weighing heavy. And they started to weigh heavy on me too. So I tried my best. I did my best. And in the end, the outcome really technically was very good. Everyone loved it, to the point where it was published in a magazine.
Right.
But to your point that, sometimes you can't please certain people because they're in a place where you can't really, change. But, we do our best. And luckily for this particular client, eventually her feelings did change. I think with recognizing how everyone else was feeling about the photos, eventually her feelings did change. So that was good. But sometimes you're going to encounter people that have their own things that they're dealing with that have nothing to do with your work.
Right. Negativity is a very contagious thing. And when one person gets negative, it has the ability to spread to us and it brings us down. But it's important to remember that negativity means nothing when you know that you truly have put in all your heart and soul to complete this project. And in the end, the photos ended up being great. And I imagine they would be. I've seen your work on Instagram. And when you started telling me this story, I started thinking, why in the world would anybody call your photos terrible? I've seen your work. They're great. They're phenomenal. Why would one client think otherwise?
Yeah, people's negative energy can kind of rub off, but I'm glad that I was able to stay focused, keep doing my best. And even though I was still feeling that energy after the wedding and after I was editing all of the photos, I'm glad that I was able to still produce something well. And once, I kind of cleared out all of that, I reviewed the photos myself, and it must have been like a few days after I delivered the photos. I reviewed the photos again, and I thought, wow, these are great photos. But it's interesting how it's all very emotional.
Right. But the most important moral of the story is that you delivered and they were great quality. And eventually the client woke up and realized that she got some of the best photos she could have ever had taken.
Yeah.
And I would like to end on this note to remember that it's always important to, whenever we deal with adversity like this, to go up to it in the face. You know, I'm not saying the client, I'm talking about whatever the issue is, confront it, that we do whatever we can to make sure that it's corrected and that in the end, everything's running like a well-oiled machine again. Clients are happy, jobs are getting done, and we're able to close out the quarter knowing that sales were up and reviews are high, 5-star reviews, things like that. In the end, as long as you know that your customers are happy, everything is going to be great. Sometimes they may not realize it right away, but adversity is just something that we're always going to face as business owners. Like I said earlier, not everybody's going to be happy, but we can always do our best to make sure they are happy. You know, we never leave a customer hanging when they're dissatisfied. We'll always work to make sure that whatever their issue is, we'll get it taken care of for them.
For sure.
And lastly, I'm going to get ready to close out the episode now. Do you have anything else that you would like to share with our listeners that we did not discuss? Anything at all that you would like to share?
No, I think we shared some great stories today.
Yes, I agree. And I especially enjoyed hearing this story that you just told me here because it's an impactful one. And I hope that all of our listeners who heard it also feel compelled and moved by it as well to make sure that they always do their best every day and they take their clients' interest at heart every single time they work with them. Too many business owners skimp on that, unfortunately. Too many of them are driven more by money than they are about customer service and client needs. And that's what makes you and me different. We actually care about our clients' needs. And it's not just about how much money we make. It's about making sure that when we're done working with them, they're ready to leave us a 5-star review.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Aisha, for joining us today. It was a pleasure having you on the show. All of your insight was great. All of your stories were interesting and all of your examples. I know that the entrepreneurial community who listens to our show is going to be extremely intrigued and motivated after they've heard this episode. It was incredible. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
And you have a great day now.
You too.
And thank you, listeners, for listening to the CDG BizCast.